is the Waxman-Markey bill. So Henry Waxman and I, in January, we said we are going to put together, he and I have sat together next to each other for 34 years, waiting for this day, waiting for the inauguration of Barack Obama. And so we said this will be our first, agenda item. We will put together this bill and we will finish it before the 4th of July. Every expert said we could not do it. Well, every political expert. Kevin, of course, was chairing this group that was down in Washington and saying we are going to work as partners to finish this legislation. And so when this legislation passed, 219 to 212 on the House floor on June 26th, it was about as fundamental a game-changing moment in the history of energy and climate change as could be imaginable. Because in that legislation, what we were able to do was to, for the first time, put a price on carbon. And inside of this legislation, we reduced by 2% per year greenhouse gases emanating from the United States for every year for 40 years in a row until there was an 80% reduction by the year 2050. We build in a 20% renewable electricity standard by the year 2020 in the United States of America, so that we telescope the time frame it takes for this wind and solar and geothermal and other renewable energy resources to come to market. We increase by 50% the efficiency, energy efficiency in all new buildings in the United States by the year 2016. My mother always said, Eddie, you've got to learn how to work smarter and not harder. And that's what energy efficiency is. She would always say that, by the way, immediately after saying that she was going to donate my brain to Harvard Medical School as a completely unused human organ. Okay? So I just wanted to know that. But anyway, that's the essence of this bill. How do we take all of these technologies which are there and make them work for our country so that we are the world's leader and not laggard, which is what we have become on all of these issues. And so what we've got here now is an incredible challenge, because while the telecom marketplace wound up investing $850 billion in the private sector in new technologies, the energy sector is 4 times larger than the tech sector. And so here we have a tremendous opportunity to have a public-private partnership, but mostly private, once we get the incentives correct for this revolution to take off and to bring these technologies to marketplace to increase the speed with which these new technologies improve and revolutionize our relationship with the energy which we consume in our country. So under our legislation, solar energy will increase by 20-fold between now and 2020. Wind energy will increase by more than 500% between now and 2020. We will have 150,000 megawatts of wind, that is 150 Seabrooks, by 2020 in our country under our legislation at a minimum. We will have a geothermal increase of at least 50% in our country. Last week, the American Hydro Association announced that while we produce 77,000 megawatts of hydropower in our country, that now that they've done a technological analysis of the existing dams, which really haven't been technologically looked at in years, and what might be possible in the rivers and off the oceans of our country, that they can add 66,000 new megawatts of hydropower by the year 2025 in our country, just by upgrading the technologies on the old dams, just by looking at the easiest power that could be harnessed from the rivers and the oceans of our own country. So all of this is happening in a way that I think none of the experts thought was possible. And so the struggle that we're having is something that is not easy, because formulating legislation of this magnitude is faced with the most powerful forces in American politics. Creating legislation is like polishing a stone. In order to smooth it out, you have to have an even rougher surface to be successful. And everyone in UCS knows that politics can be very rough. You always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes you get what you need. And that's what Markey Waxman represents. Waxman Markey equivalents in the United States Senate. And they are going to begin deliberation in the Environment Subcommittee, the Environment Full Committee of the Senate next week. So we are moving, and we are moving very, very rapidly. The legislation is on the agenda, finally, for our country. And it's about time, because it's on the agenda of every sixth grade science class in the United States. It's on the agenda for every sophomore in high school science class in the United States. It's on the agenda for every college student in the United States. In the same way that the suffragette movement rose up to give women the right to vote, that the Freedom Riders went south to give the disenfranchised blacks the right to vote, this green generation has risen up and set the agenda for our country. And they are demanding that finally we respect the science and the challenge that this threat of global warming presents to our planet, and that the United States should be the leader. So this is the moment. This is the historic challenge that we are faced with. The good news is that when we do the polling, and we factor in not just global warming, but the 2 million new jobs that we could create in our country, the oil that we can back out as we move to a smart grid, which we all know is really just an electricity internet. That is, the telecommunications revolution, the broadband revolution, now makes it possible for us to harness the wind and the solar from the deserts and the prairies and off the ocean and off people's roofs. It can now be managed. That's what the smart grid is. It's the electricity internet. And so one technology revolution, one science breakthrough begets the next, which begets the next. And that's who the United States should be. If we look at the 21st century, and we try to decide what should our 4% of the population be in relationship to the other 96% of the population on the planet, we should be the innovators. We should be the people who are trying to make these breakthroughs that make it possible for us to give to the rest of the countries in the world the sustainable energy technologies which they should be. We are going to use our own American ingenuity in order to accomplish that goal. Working with you, my hope is that we can create the spur for the Senate, Senator Kerry, all those who are working for its passage, to pass that legislation.